All right, let's jump straight into this explainer. We're taking what is usually a totally terrifying medical diagnosis and turning it into, honestly, an incredible story about a biological marvel. I mean, if you've ever dealt with back pain, or know someone who has, you know the absolute dread that hits you when you hear the words herniated disc. But today, we're diving into the science of what's actually happening inside your body. And, as you'll see, your biology is incredibly well equipped to handle it. Now, if you've ever stared at an MRI of a herniated disc, that scary dark mass pressing right into your spinal nerves, you'd probably just assume surgery is your only option. It looks like a mechanical problem that needs a mechanical fix, right? Like someone just needs to go in there and cut the thing out. But the reality? Well, based on a ton of clinical research, it's actually much more empowering than that. To really get why surgery isn't always the default answer, we first need to understand the exact environment where this injury happens.
Which brings us to Section 1, disc herniation, not the end.
So to understand why this diagnosis isn't a life sentence, we've got to look at the actual structure of the disc itself. The absolutely crucial point here is that your intervertebral discs are nearly avascular. That means they do not have their own direct blood supply. They're basically made up of this jelly-like center, the nucleus, surrounded by a tough fibrous ring. And since there are no direct blood vessels running into them, they rely entirely on diffusion from the bones above and below them just to get nutrients. Now, this isolated avascular setup, it perfectly sets the stage for our medical mystery, because when that inner jelly pushes out, it suddenly enters a part of the body where, technically, it just doesn't belong.
And that takes us to Section 2, the immune system cleanup crew.
This is where the real hero of our story enters. When that disc material ruptures and hits the epidural space, your body instantly trips an alarm. It kicks off a phenomenon known as spontaneous resorption. Essentially, this is a natural process where the herniated disc material actually shrinks in size or, get this, completely disappears without any surgery. Because that disc jelly was previously hidden away in an area with no blood flow, when it suddenly leaks out, your immune system looks at it and goes, "Whoa, foreign invader." It immediately launches an immune and inflammatory response, acting as your own internal demolition and cleanup crew to clear out the rogue tissue. Let's break down exactly how this happens in Section 3, Steps of Spontaneous Resorption. Okay, so here is your body's healing blueprint in action. It starts with that alarm, a controlled inflammatory response identifying the rogue tissue. But since this area doesn't have good blood flow, the body actually has to build brand new microscopic roads. It's called neovascularization, and it rushes blood right to the scene. Then, down these new roads come the macrophages. These guys are the heavy-duty cleanup workers of your immune system. They secrete specialized enzymes that literally digest and dissolve that rogue disc material. And the ultimate goal of all this? The physical shrinking of the hernia.
But this raises a big question, covered in Section 4, Chemical Radiculitis, the Pain Puzzle.
See, we usually assume the pain from a herniated disc comes entirely from a mechanical issue, a physical bulge pinching the nerve root. But there is a massive missing piece to this puzzle: chemical radiculitis. When your immune system sends in those cleanup workers, it releases inflammatory mediators. This creates what is basically a chemical fire right around that highly sensitive nerve. So the pain you're feeling? It isn't just a physical pinch, it's literally a chemical burn caused by the exact same immune response that's trying to heal you. And because of this chemical radiculitis, we run into this fascinating clinical reality. The severity of your pain does not always match the size of the herniation you see on your MRI. You could have a tiny, almost microscopic physical bulge that is leaking highly irritating chemicals, causing absolute agonizing 10 out of 10 pain. On the flip side, you could have a huge physical mass that isn't inflamed at all, and you barely feel a thing. The pain is just as much chemical as it is mechanical. Which leads us to Section 5, Natural Repair versus Regeneration. As this whole healing process unfolds, we have to draw a really strict biological line between natural repair and regeneration. What your body is doing here is repair. It's clearing away the damage, getting the inflammation under control, and reducing the physical pressure on the nerve. It's kind of like a road crew clearing debris after a landslide, patching up the asphalt so traffic can move again. What it is not doing is regeneration. Your body isn't magically growing a brand new, pristine, perfectly plump disc. The original structure might be permanently altered. Maybe you'll lose a little disc height, even though the crisis itself is totally resolved. And honestly, this distinction explains a super common yet really confusing scenario for a lot of people. Clinical healing often outpaces structural healing. What does that mean? Well, you might wake up one morning feeling fantastic.
The pain is gone, the numbness is gone, you are clinically healed. But if we put you in an MRI machine that exact same day, the scan might still show a noticeable herniation. The structural cleanup that we see on the image lags way behind your physical symptom relief. So you start feeling better long before the scan actually looks perfectly clean.
Now get ready for this. Section 6, Surprising Disc Resorption Stats.
Okay, let's look at what is probably the most counterintuitive, mind-blowing data point in all of this research. 90%. Up to 90% is the maximum spontaneous resorption rate for the absolute most severe catastrophic type of disc herniation. I mean, let that sink in for a second. The worst type of herniation actually has the highest natural healing rate. How is that even possible?
Well, it all comes down to how much material leaks out. Look at this. A simple bulge, that only has about a 13% resorption rate. Moving up in severity to a protrusion, it bumps to 40%. An extrusion jumps to 70%. But a sequestration, which is when a massive piece of the disc completely breaks off and is just floating freely in your spinal canal, that has a whopping 90% healing rate. Why? Because the more freely that disc material leaks out of its little avascular home and into the blood-rich epidural space, the easier it is for your immune system's macrophages to spot it, surround it, and absorb it. A tiny bulge barely triggers the alarm. But a massive sequestration, that sounds every alarm in the building and brings the whole cleanup crew running.
Because of this absolutely incredible natural ability to break down extruded disc material, conservative treatment, things like physiotherapy, controlled movement, and just giving it time is usually more than enough for the vast majority of cases. Surgery is really strictly reserved for extreme red flags. We're talking progressive neurological weakness where you're actively losing muscle function, or cauda equina syndrome, which affects bowel and bladder control, or pain that is just completely unmanageable. But outside of those extremes, your body is already actively working on the cure.
We so often view our bodies as these fragile machines that just break down and need physical fixing from the outside. But knowing what you know now, that you literally have a built-in microscopic cleanup crew capable of dissolving the most severe disc herniations entirely on its own, how does that change your perspective on your body's innate power to heal itself? Thanks for joining me for this explainer, and I hope it leaves you feeling a whole lot more empowered about your health.